Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Jamal. We are back for another episode of Good Energy Talks. Like I said, Good Energy Talks is all about connecting with people like-minded people who are in the industry doing great things, from producers to talent managers and so much more. It's about having the opportunity to be able to hear their stories and how they got to where they are at today. So my next guest is such a legend, my big brother, the GOAT. He is from Houston, Texas, has produced over 30 plus films and so much more. He has been such a light to me and such a huge mentor to me. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my brother, the GOAT, Mr. Greg Carter, man. What's up, baby?
I don't know how I'm gonna come off that intro, man.
I gotta give you that. I gotta give you all your praises.
I like the fire. I like the fire and the smoke. Okay, I'm with it. I'm with it.
How's it going, man? How you holding up?
It's good. You know, it's like I tell people, you know, in the business, they get into a situation where they feeling a little down or whatever. And there's been a lot to kind of feel that way about the last, 18 months. It's been real tough. But I say, take it as a way to, or as a time to rebuild and do different things and focus. Yeah. Because, before then, really since pandemic, we've been working hard because everybody was trying to build up their streaming platform. Yeah. And nobody really had time to stop and think and respect and reflect on things. So I took that time, and I tell people that reflect and kind of focus, be ready. Yeah,
I love that because I think, like you said, these past couple of years have been crazy in the industry. It's like people are kind of just tired in this space of like, am I finally gonna get my big break? Like, is it finally the industry finally gonna get better? So many ups and downs. So I'm curious, like, how did you kind of get started? I know you've been producing so much. Like, how was that? What was that first start for you? Did you want to be in entertainment growing up in Texas at an early age, and how did that all kind of come about?
Well, when I was starting out, I knew that there was something about the entertainment business that captivated me. Yeah. But my undergraduate degree is in engineering. I'm actually an engineer. And I just knew that there was something that was inside me that needed to come out into the world. And so when I was at Texas A&M,
shout out Texas A&M.
Shout out. Undefeated in SEC play right now.
Shout out Texas A&M.
My professor was a guy by the name of Charles Gordone. Charles Gordone was the first Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright that was African American. Wow. And so he was a guest lecturer at Texas A&M at the time. And I said, I want to take a class, and my brother said, you're real good. You're talking to people. You should go and take that. And I said, okay, cool. And so I said, all right. So I went to his acting class, and I even got cast in there was a play called The Fantastics. Now, it was been on off Broadway for years and years and years. So they did a version of it at Texas A&M. Yeah. And it was the most unmitigated disaster I could have ever did. Because I didn't realize when I'm on stage, I sweat like a horse in the summer. I sweat. So I said, you know what? I can act and I can sing, but maybe let me not look like I'm about to have a coronary on set.
Were you nervous?
I don't know what it is. I played football. Okay. And that's the natural thing. So, during the rehearsals, we just kind of moving around, no big thing. But when you're on stage and you singing, you bringing it. So I just sheets of water. I said, okay, maybe I need to be behind the camera. But it was just one of those things where I gravitated to telling stories. Yeah. And it's just been a passion of mine.
I love that. It's crazy. I moved to LA in 2019 to pursue acting, and I knew of your work through Natasha Ward. Shout out to Natasha Ward, the casting director.
Shout out to Natasha Ward.
And I was just like, I knew what the work that you had done with the Tar and Jimmy Fox. I was like, I gotta connect with this guy. And I was like, bro, I did everything about willpower to finally connect. And honestly, I feel like we didn't really connect until this year at Sundance. Yep. And the rest was history, bro. And I appreciate you because you really have been such not only just a mentor, but a lot of times people say they're gonna do certain things for you and that you never hear back, but you have always been a guy who really have not only just looked out for me, but always just inspired me to know that I'm on the on the right track. So just curious, like, did you ever have like mentors kind of like that kind of help you through your trajectory kind of going into the industry, or people to kind of help you and like keep you encouraged and motivated to know that you can really do this and really, you know, put your all into it and make a living out of it?
Yeah. I would say I mentioned Charles Gordone because he helped nurture the first skill, which was writing. I think that's the foundation of a lot of what I do. But as I begin to grow as an artist, I begin to realize that, you know, it is not a gig that happens because you're all about self. Your journey will be about helping other people. If it's not, your career will go nowhere.
That's true.
And so it's one reason why when I was going to film festivals, I would reach out to everybody. Now, Bill Duke, big inspiration, because Bill Duke is my man. Bill would be
shout out to Bill Duke, man. Legendary. We love you, Bill.
He would tell me things like, Carter, Bill, no, don't do that. You know, he would break it down for me. Mm-hmm. And then I would have other mentors besides Bill Duke, and I mentioned, Charles Gordone. But a lot of times it would be people who I would work with that would be very much into understanding that I was a young person on a journey, and they would take the time and have the patience with me. Several writers, Bill McCandless, he wrote The Iron Giant. He's from Texas. He was my homie, and he would just like tell me different things. Like they would spend the time to read my stuff and say, this is not good, terrible, whatever. But you need those kind of advocates to say, oh, gee, this is good. This is good. Now, why don't you do this? You know, those kind of people that would spend that effort into, just riding the waves with those failures and those successes. That's really when you can have a real down for your mentor. Because, it's real easy to be a mentor to someone that's a bright shooting star. Because they can aid you because you bringing them to the table, they make you shine. But what's really hard, what's really the sign of a good mentor, when you're dealing with somebody that's ups and downs, when they sad, that they need encouragement. And I think that's one of the reasons why, when I think about those mentors, like Bill Duke, Charles Gordone, Tim McCandless, those people really were the type of folk that would roll with me when I was not G money yet. You know what I'm saying?
You was coming up and like trying to break it in.
Yes. And I try to do that the same way because, so I teach. I went back to school. I promised my mom I was going to go back to school before she passed. I said, I'm going to finish my doctorate. And so now I teach. I'm a professor at the University of Houston, as well as line produce, as well as write, direct. Oh Lord, I got too many jobs. But for me, working with people who are trying to figure it all out, is important. Not with the people. Man, I work with anybody. A couple of years ago, I had I got paired with. He's my man. His name is Chill. He's a filmmaker from Houston. In fact, he's directing his one of his first shorts this weekend. But I worked with him on a documentary short. It got nominated in the OSP Image Award.
Wow.
And I feel like it's important for me to not just be a student to older people who are trying to teach me, but I got to also be the mentor to the young mentees. And so you got to be able to have that ability to stop. Just stop for a second and really listen to people. Because I remember when I was out there hustling at ABFF, and I'm trying to talk to people at the end of each panel and trying to be able to, here's my tape, here's my script, and people be like, look, man, I don't take this, whatever. Like when I do those panels now, I really try to have, like when I give people my number, you go the real number now. And listen, you gonna really get me when you call. Now I'll be looking out for the scam calls, but you're going to get my number. It's going to ring, and when I call, I'll give you what I can, as much time as I can. But I think that's really important.
And you mentioned something earlier about you direct, you write, you're a producer. I think a lot of times people don't really understand the difference between line producing and like producing, like and producer. So could you break down like those two, like the difference of those two? Because I feel like you've done literally everything. So for people who don't know what those different positions, descriptions are.
Right. So technically speaking, the producer is in charge of the two components, left brain, right brain, the creative and the financial. Okay, so as far as the creative go, he will be the person that hires people, or person who's gonna make all the creative decisions.
Okay.
That would be the director. He's also in charge of hiring the person who's gonna be over the fiduciary matters of the film, which would be the line producer. The line producer would then, and the producer are technically equals.
Yeah, okay.
We both have a responsibility to the producer to ensure the success of the movie. It's just different types of success. And so as a line producer, the motto is and this is what I tell people. I tell you, when I teach young line producers, I say, okay, without passion or without prejudice, I am there to fight for the fiduciary matters of this show.
Yeah.
So I have come into situations where a producer is a little gamey.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, yo, I'm not going to do that. Well, you work for me. I said, no, I work for this movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you know that we're going to try to rig some stuff to make sure we don't pay everybody what they're supposed to get out, I got a problem with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm there to save money, but I'm also there to make sure that everybody walks away with what they were promised
That part.
when they came down.
Part.
Now the producer, again, he's normally given the guardianship, normally either by a executive producer or either by the studio or streaming platform to go and put it all together. Now he might be, a writer who is a producer, or he might be a director who can produce. You have to, as a line producer, you have to have those conversations with them and say, okay, well, here's where I'm going to draw the line. Yeah. If you do this, I will have to do this, or so forth. I think it's important that the line producer has those conversations with the creative team to say, hey, I'm here to make sure you get everything you want. But understand that sometimes that means that you might have to make a decision. Okay, you want to shoot for an extra day? Well, you know what? You're not getting that jib. Yeah. Okay. You can shoot one extra day, but you can't have the jib. So pick your choice.
So y'all really the ones okay, this is what we can do, this is what we can't do.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so normally when I'm having that conversation with the network, or whether with the producer or with the network and the producer together, it's based on the fact that they have given me a certain level of control. And then I on the flip side, like I said, I've had that same conversation as a producer working with line producers.
Okay.
I expect for you to tell me the hard truth. Yeah. And sometimes it gets so innocuous. It's like, okay, hey, we know that we have, budgeted $5 million for this movie, but, maybe, I don't know, maybe we got a 25% tax credit. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that means that if you got, you're expecting $400,000 back, but remember, you don't get that back till 6 months from now. So you got to know, you got to figure that out some kind of way. So that means that you might not be able to get all these different things or make these different choices, because that money won't even come back until after we've shot. So it's a pretty big deal, and I take it seriously. And so I've been directing, writing, producing for a minute. But, I line produce a lot of times because people ask me, I say, well, okay, man, I line produce this time, but all right. But it has been an interesting experience. Yeah. Because when I line produce, normally the people are younger than I am, who are the director or even sometimes the producer. And so they count on me to tell them the truth. And it can be fun. It can be challenging, but it is something that I think we don't have enough people doing it.
Yeah. I love that. And I think because you have a lot of great success, producing so many films and directing and writing. Sometimes, when we're always on this grind off like an entertainment, it's like you never get a chance to really appreciate how far you come, and be able to give yourself flowers, or be able to appreciate or pat yourself on the back and be like, dang, I did this. Yeah. So out of all of the films that you've been a part of, and I know it's always a hard question, but like, has there been one of you like that maybe has been like one of your most rewarding films so far, or something that has been the most greatest opportunity that you maybe worked hard for that you're proud of today? I know you're proud of everything, but
Yeah, it's weird because every film is should be. I feel like every film should be greater than the one that came before.
yeah,
So that when I do a movie, it gets very difficult to kind of look back. But if I had to look back, I would guess it would be not one film, but the second film.
yeah,
The first and the second movie. So you say, well, what was the first, second movie? So you go back way back in history. I'm not saying how old I am, but I did. My very first movie was called Fifth Ward, and
Fifth Ward was classic.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I talk to people who are in the business, it's like, yo, man, that's the OG movie.
Yeah.
Yo, and I'm like, okay. But what made Fifth Ward unique was that it was at the right time. There had been, Boys in the Hood, which was kind of like the coming of age hood joint that was for like California. And then we had Matty Rich do his thing. And that was kind of like the coming of age joint for, New York.
Yeah.
There was a movie like New Jersey Drive, but those were kind of like the first ones. These were really true independent things that were happening without necessarily any studio. And so when I did that movie,
What year was this?
oh man, I'm gonna show my age.
Well, never mind.
That would have been
early
19. Okay, so
early 2000.
Yeah, no. So I made that film, and that would have been 1997.
Wow.
So that would have been it. I made it, and everybody went crazy about it, and it premiered at South by Southwest, and we didn't have it done soon enough to submit for Sundance, but everybody, we gave it to South by Southwest. It premiered. It did really good, and then it got, of course, hooded out. They were like, at that time, there was still a Blockbuster video and a Hollywood video, right? And it seems like crazy that that's gone now, but I said, it's a gripping story about a man coming. It just ends up with a black man on the cover with a gun in his hand. Okay, we gonna market it like that. That's what we're doing. But it did really well. And the reason why I said the second movie, because the second movie was just like, I'm not even really happy with it. I didn't like it. It was called Thug Life. But I think it is because, or the reason why I say that is because there are lots of first-time filmmakers.
Yeah.
There are not many second-time filmmakers. And that's really how if you think about a line, you have to have 2 points to make a line. And so there are a lot of people who are out there who figure out some kind of way they're going to make their first movie, and maybe it don't turn out the way that it does. But if you can live to fight another day and make a second movie, then you have a slim chance to have a career.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think the first and second movie are so important, because there's so many people that make first-time filmmaker. It sounds like a great title until you 10 years down the road and you never made another movie. So it's important, I think, to make that second movie.
Yes, and you learn as you just get better every time. You know what I mean?
Every time, yes.
You have had such an amazing career, I might add, and I feel like you had a chance to work with a lot of GOATs. I feel like these are GOATs and legends like Jatari Turner, Jamie Foxx, and Jamal Everett. Just kidding.
I love Jamal Everett. That Jamal Everett guy, I don't know, man. He's kind of a ham. He is talented. No, I'm playing. Yeah.
But no, I'm just kidding. But tell me about that experience working with, those two GOATs. So just not only just them, but other people who I've, to be completely honest, have been an inspiration for me since I was a little kid. So how was it working with, these different types of people who we, at least for me, and I'm pretty sure everybody who really who are inspired by and really moved by, to be honest.
Well, Jamie's originally from Texas, like me. And so we have a whole thing where, we always think about the journey as something that happens because of the fact that you focus and you're talented, whatever. But, the real uniqueness about Hollywood is is kind of operating in that gray area when you're really not sure what the hell's going to happen. But
you never know.
Yeah, but you're going to try to figure out what's happening as you go.
Yeah.
And so, like particularly with Jamie and Datari, it's like, they were like, okay, G, we know you do this and you've done that. I think by that time I had already did my TV series on UMC and All Black.
Yeah.
Well, it used to be called UMC, and then it changed the name to All Black. I did Fifth Ward season 1 and 2. I was the showrunner and creator of that show. And, they said, and I did a couple movies for BT. And they were like, well, hey, G, how you feel about this? And I said, okay, cool. They had read a script that I wrote this holiday script, and
I love Christmas.
Yeah,
Christmas
and it
movies.
just got sent all around.
Yeah,
and then and so we want to try to make this thing. It was weird because, a couple people who were over at I did a movie like I mentioned with Boris Kojo and Nicole Ari Parker for Lifetime, and that was called Safe Space, and so. I was up there doing that. I was line producing, I think, and they knew I was kind of doing some things. How about you come get behind the? I said, cool. I'm ready to direct. Right, not a problem.
It's because you knew that all of those things that led you to
and so we had a couple initial conversations, and then I sat down with Paramount. And they had been familiar with me because BET is part of the Paramount family. Right, exactly. So it was really only a matter of time probably, but it just happened a lot quicker going through them, which somehow I wrote. And it was a wonderful experience. We have a 4-picture deal to do these movies over there, but we got cut short by the pandemic, right? But what I found is that everyone was really supportive. They understood that I kind of wanted to shoot my things in Houston. And, because for me, that's my hometown and I want to see people have the opportunity to work. And it was funny because I was like, I told them from the beginning, we can shoot anywhere, but not Atlanta, Georgia. Not that I'm throwing salt at Atlanta, Georgia. I just said, I want to do for my hometown.
You want to put on for the good old Texas.
Yeah, I want to put up for the hometown.
And it hit different till you went to Texas A&M. It just, I get it. I understand.
Yeah. Well, and I think for the most part, when you think about independent filmmaking, and this really ain't independent, I'm doing it for the studios, but it's like, there's a regional aspect of that, which means that you're telling a story that has some uniqueness to where you're from, where you're at, the mindset, the culture. And, Houston has always been one of those cities that has a certain gravitas, but doesn't have like the name of like Atlanta or Charlotte or Miami or whatever. Yeah. It's kind of hard to put your finger on what exactly makes it what it is. I mean, we've had our superstars like Beyonce and, everybody know about sipping on that syrup, but, it's really kind of hard to put your finger on. So when you try to tell somebody that we're going to go here and do this movie as opposed to going here and getting this 30% tax credit, it can be a difficult sell. But I found that, Jamie, Datari, and the Paramount people kind of believed in what I did. So
I loved it.
We actually got greenlit for a part 3 movie, but we were trying to shoot it in 2023, and we were all shut down again because then we had a strike, pandemic. Strike, But again, I took that time to go back in the lab, start writing some stuff. So I feel like coming out, I have so much new stuff, content to kind of really rock and roll with. And I think that's really what you want. You want to have a partner with the movies and stuff that you do that feels really strongly about the idea that you have a vision. And you have something to say. And if you can do that, then that's a place like, you would say, well, don't you want to do it? No, I'm happy where I'm at.
Right.
So, but I think that's what you want. And what I can say is that I've met some really nice people from some other places like Netflix. And I've had some conversations with, people at Lionsgate about doing some stuff.
I love
that I my eyes wouldn't have been open to it had we not had a strike. Because I probably would have been like, why just come over here and make this bread? I'm cool.
Yeah. I love that. And like you made a good point. It's like sometimes it's all about kind of working with people. Like you kind of understand a person's flow of how people work. So it's like you get that. It's that sense of like comfortability that you get, and that if I can trust you with this to make if I could trust you with this because I know it's going to get done, and I know that with your resources and your tools, your knowledge of the game, they can really trust you to like really do it.
Yeah.
And I know you're working. I don't know if I can talk about this, but I know you're working on a new project right now. The Chuck Berry story.
Chuck Berry story, yeah.
And so Chuck Berry is a legend. So I know you probably can't talk too much about it, but like, tell me. I know you've been doing a lot of research right now, and like, it's a biopic. So tell me about just your preparation when it comes to preparing for a film and getting ready for those, like just writing and just producing. Like, where do you start? How do you kind of get the pieces? How do you kind of get things moving for yourself?
Well, I think you have to go into the idea that even if you wrote something, even though I was going to write the Greg Carter story, I would go into it thinking, I don't know nothing about Greg Carter.
Yeah.
You have to go into it thinking that you want, and you're going to fight for a sense of authenticity. Yeah. And so that's really important. So you got to say, okay, I got to go out there and get the story myself. And so I had met, there's a guy by the name of Kirk Shaw. Mm-hmm. Kirk Shaw was a producer. He won an Oscar for The Hurt Locker. He produced that movie. And I met Kirk Shaw, and he was like, well, gee, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm just this, a little that. Because, again, we were just last month, we were still caught up in strike land.
I feel like we low-key still is.
Everybody's still here, but no, everybody's 2025.
Sorry, nah,
we're going to pray that into existence. It's going to be fire.
Nah, it's time. It's time.
But I said, I've just been kind of chilling, teaching. And he said, well, I really feel like you're the person, because, you have this strong music background in all the movies that you do, particularly last stuff with
And you sing too, right?
I sing.
So you might do a little singing in there.
My Sherry amor.
Yeah.
Don't get me started. Okay, I'm going to charge y'all a little extra coin if I keep going.
Go ahead, G-Money.
I'm the son of a preacher now, like that son of a preacher, man. But I told Kirk, I told Kirk, I said, I'm down, whatever we need to do. But I said, I don't want to do it unless I know can really, do it. Because I don't want to just do a Wikipedia search and then start writing. I really want to, there's so many people who know part of the story that's never been documented, written. So I need to go out there and talk to them. So what I really discovered that was really interesting is that the history of Chuck Berry is the history of us as Black folk and Black music. Mm-hmm. You got to think about the Mississippi River. It was the first superhighway, like the internet. Ideas, not just commerce. You had cotton and everything, but ideas went up and down the Mississippi. If you look at those cities, New Orleans, Memphis, St. Louis, Chicago, and even Minneapolis. All those are on the Mississippi River. Yeah. Okay? So when we have people like the great Scott Joplin, one of the best first pianists who was just doing it, these guys were taking what had started as music for, like when slaves had Sundays off. Yeah. The weird thing is they weren't allowed to read, but they could read music. There was no law that said they couldn't read music. They just couldn't read a book. So if you got caught reading a book, you're curtains. But if you read music, they didn't care. Yeah. So the thing is that it gave them a mechanism to express themselves. And that was the beginning of jazz. This would have been, circa like 1830s, even, anytime during slavery. So on Sundays, the slaves could go out to the square in New Orleans and they could play music. Okay. Now they couldn't sing. But they could play the music. Yeah. That was the beginning of jazz. And then jazz slowly elevated as we got closer to the Civil War. And after the Civil War, up until the the late 1800s, that was the beginning of the blues. Yeah. Okay. And then the blues, again, that music would go up the Mississippi, down the Mississippi. Each time somebody bringing a little something to it. Then you had these artists like John Johnson and all these people, these great blues artists in the early 1920s. Again, it's just morphing and changing. So then most people have seen the movie Cadillac Records. So that was like the late 40s, early 50s. By that time, the blues was its own things, but as new artists came with new instruments, like the electric guitar came out like 1947. So the electric guitar came out, and it was a new way to kind of play the blues, but then you could do different things with it. Chuck Berry came at a time where there was just uniqueness in this new instrument.
I love it.
And he didn't, because really at the beginning of the 1950s, most artists, like if you take T-Bone Walker, they would play the electric guitar like they played an acoustic guitar. Chuck Berry began to play with the idea that you could do different things, like you could literally make that guitar almost replicate a human voice, with the way he would play it.
They knew how to just sell it. Sell it, man.
And do things with a physical performance that you couldn't do. Now, what made him unique is that Chuck Berry could play the guitar and sing. You take somebody like Little Richard, he played the piano and he sang, but the piano is not necessarily conducive to doing a lot of movement on stage. You got to pretty much stay where this 800-pound instrument is. But a guitar, you could dance with it and sing with it and sing to it. And that made it something unique. Now, keep in mind, all these shows that were happening, this was like 1955. Emmett Till was 1956. Okay. So black people are being lynched and killed at the same time. This music is making a revolutionary jump. Even say an evolutionary jump into something that we would morph into what we consider today. If you look at other countries, whether it's in Europe or Asia, their music hadn't changed for hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years. Like when you go to those places now, you listen to you can go to Russia or Germany, you hear pop music. They're basically taking our music and just singing lyrics in their language over it. So these are the things that Chuck Berry did. It's just so encompassed story. It's so encompassing. And all this was happening in what we call now, we look at now, it's called the Great Migration. All these blacks moving from the South to the North. And, for a family back then, there was no football as a way out of the hood. Everybody lived in the hood, but there wasn't a way out. The one way that you had is to be an entertainer. So the gift that we would give our children, if you were like 1930, 1940, 1950, you give them a musical instrument. And people would find a way. They'd give them an instrument, and that would be a way to make extra money. Back then, if you go back maybe 100 years before the 1930s, slaves could get extra privileges if they could play an instrument. And so these are things that were ingrained in us, and it was something that us as a people became part of our culture. And I think that's what's important. That's what's been missing from a lot of the movies that we see. It's almost like they make a movie say, how soon can we get to the next song? But one thing I want to be able to do with this story is to kind of make it to where we have a history lesson. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he worked at Netflix. He's like, yo, you got to win the living room. I was like, what the hell that mean? Win the living room. So, okay. And so when I think about this, what that really means is you want to have people, whether they 60 or 6, want to watch this movie. Why? And I think that's what I want to be able to do with this story that I'm endeavoring to do. It's a big task. So,
but you're doing it, man, and I can't wait to see how it all unfold. And you mentioned earlier about like the word family. I think for me, I know that I am standing right strong today in my right mind because my grandma prayers, my mom prayers are just so much more. So just curious, talking about how that balance of like working in entertainment, but also like making time for like family. I think this entertainment is always ongoing, and you feel like the people that you work with on set is your family, which it is your family, but it's just like, how do you balance, the two of like, okay, I'm gonna make this time for my family and like make it for work, like. How do you balance the two?
Well, I was one of the lucky ones in that when I was coming out of being an engineer into being a filmmaker, I was there kind of grounded and rooted in being a family man. For me, it was important that I make sure that I check those boxes
Yeah.
because in the big scheme of things, we're this earth home that we call our
Yeah.
body will soon decay.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that I brought something more to this world than just, a movie or a music video or whatever. So that's always just been important to me. It does mean that I am not as nimble as some people. If somebody say, yo, man, we going to a big party, we finna go over here. And I was like, well, I got to cook tonight.
Yeah. Got priorities. I got something to do.
So you can't, but I think what it does, it builds character.
Yeah.
And I think character counts because ultimately that's what I hope to do. I hope that, the products that I make, the content that I make, helps people on the path of the building character. Whatever that definition is. My definition of character might be different than someone else, but whatever that is, it helps them build that because, I think being part of a family, there's a certain amount of humility that has to come with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens is that people get into a situation where they feel like that they are so great, whatever. And I think you need that moment where you humble yourself to something greater than you are.
Yes.
And if you can't do that, then I think it will mean that there will always be something quite off about whatever it is you do.
Yeah. I love that. Wow, that's real. Yeah, that's so true. Because even for me, right, being in LA for about 5 years now and being so far away from home, I went home to North Carolina this weekend outside my family and I got reminded of kind of why I decided to make this jump and to move to LA. But you realize, you miss those moments with, parents getting older, nephews and so it's it is tough when you know that you are called to do great things, but at the end of the day, if you don't do it, then who will? But it is tough when you're kind of navigating the two of I want to make impact and I want to do great things, but I am missing those moments. So how was it growing up for you? Are you the only child or?
No, I'm from a big family. So my dad's a preacher. My mom was an educator.
Are they still?
My mom passed.
Okay.
But my dad is still with us. He's 93, still driving.
Wow.
Yeah, Reverend Carter is good. But there's 5 kids. I'm the middle. I have a boy and a girl above me and a boy and a girl below me.
Wow.
And so, being a middle child, it kind of keeps you, you have a different perspective of things because normally your sense of worth doesn't come from being the oldest child or the youngest child.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from being able to engage in outdoor, well, let's just say outdoor, but things outside of the immediate family.
Yes.
And so that means that you probably have to be very sociable when it comes to cutting out who your identity is, what your identity is. Oldest child, you always love because you're the oldest.
Yeah.
Baby, you always love because you're the baby.
You the baby. Yeah. Everybody yeah.
Well, you the middle child, who?
Yeah.
Who are you again? I'm your son. I don't remember having you. I'm your son. No, I'm being joking about it, but it's true. So you had to go out and find a way to identify who you are outside of the family unit. And I think that's what made for a really interesting experience growing up. But I can say that it made for a very sensible look at the business.
Yeah.
I never felt like if I didn't become a superstar or if I didn't win an Oscar that I failed. I just felt like there were so many other things that was important. It's really weird now because even now, as I've been dealing with a lot of different things on the, I'm very interested in politics now. It's the ultimate evolution, I think, of my desire to be a benefit to the community.
Yeah.
I want to tell great stories. Yes, I want to be considered a great dad, but I want to be able to help others too.
Along the way, it's
so
powerful.
I've kind of gotten involved in politics in a weird way. But that's just part of the get down. It's just part of the thing. Way things work. Yeah.
I love that. I know you mentioned earlier about, one thing you promised your mom that you'll go to school before she passed away. So, thinking about, growing up, when you were, y'all were kids, your mom or dad and things like that, what do you feel like would be something that, not just like if you could have granted, I feel like when people, our loved ones pass away, they're always with us and they're always in our heart. But if there was like a conversation like that you could probably have with her now to this day, like even think about all the great things you are doing and still doing, like, what do you feel like that conversation would look like or feel like for you?
Well, I would hope that she would be pleased with the idea that I have learned to let go about a lot of things, and I think that my faith in God has become even more to accepting. There's an old saying, it says, ask for strength to change the things I can. Ask for courage to accept the things that I can.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
But wisdom to know the difference. And that's where you're coming in, I would hope that she would be happy that I'm getting the wisdom to know the difference, because I've had so many people that I've tried to help, and it's like, no, you should do this, do this. But you realize that if you try to put all your effort and energy to helping those people, it takes you off your mission. And it's very hard to know the difference, because we seek to be good people.
Every single day.
But it's really hard. Now, if people have no conscience, they don't help nobody. They do what they do. But when you really are trying to help people, you want to know that you can kind of figure out the difference. And that's really tough, that finding that wisdom to know. And that's its own bumps and bruises and everything else.
People do you wrong.
Absolutely. Because, as an actor, you've had conversations with people. They're like, oh, man, you ain't going to do this. You ain't going to do that. And then you turn around and do it. And then you got lots of people, I knew you were going to do it. I knew you were going to, I can't wait to blow. And it's like, you can't allow yourself to be overly hyped by people who say how great you are. You literally walk on water. But you can't let yourself be pulled down by people who got the negativity and saying whatever.
So
finding that middle ground, the wisdom to understand it, that's really tough. So I hope mom would just sit back and say, I see you on your wisdom journey, and I think you're doing good.
Well, I know she would say that. And I just honestly just want to say, like, thank you so much for, like, just all that you do. I feel like you have been such a huge, like, advocate for me, like, these past, like, few months, and it really means a lot. And I think you are really, really not only just opening so many doors for other people who look like ourselves, but like for generations to come, like whether it's producers, actors, filmmakers, line producers, and just really being that beacon of light. And so the whole purpose of me doing this is really kind of shine light and hear people's journeys and trajectories and stories of pretty much how they really kind of got started, in this business. And so I just want to say, it's been such an honor really to kind of have you and be able to, like, talking about this journey. And, like, it is truly amazing to not only just see all the good things you are doing. I look forward to not only working with you, but continue to build, bro.
And listen, I look forward to seeing you continue to grow and what you're doing. Like, you see him doing the podcast. I'm like, damn straight, it's about time.
I know.
Yeah, no, bro. Thank you.
Yeah. So, like I said, guys, it's our second episode of Good Energy Talks. I want to leave you guys with just say inspiration, though. Inspiration to kind of just keep going. Like, there's never going to be a perfect time. You're never going to have the right answer. You're going to mess up like 2 times, 3 times. You may fall down like 5 times, but you keep getting back up. And that's why it's so important to have community, like-minded people around you to keep you going, keep you motivated, keep you inspired, when things get tough. So you just know you got this. We believe in you. I believe in you. The sky's the limit. There's nothing that you can do. So God bless y'all. See you at the next one. Peace.
We hit.